Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey, so I have been debating whether or not to post this, but it's been eating at me for a year now, and with Halloween coming up again, I just can't stop thinking about it. Last year, I was home alone on Halloween night. My neighborhood usually gets a decent amount of trick-or-treaters, so I had my porch light on and a big bowl of candy ready. Nothing out of the ordinary, a few cute costumes, polite thank yous, the usual. By around 10:30, the street was quiet and I was about to call it a night when I saw a small group of kids walk up, 4 of them, all around 10 or 11. They were laughing and comparing candy. Behind them though, standing just outside the light of my porch, was someone else. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, wearing a dark hoodie and one of those cheap blank Halloween masks, the kind that's just a flat white face with tiny black eye holes and a slit for the mouth. He didn't say anything, he didn't move, he just stood there. I figured he was a dad keeping an eye on his kids. It's late after all. But after the kids left, he didn't go with them, and he just stood there, still as ever, facing my house. I waved awkwardly, which got him to finally move down the street. With the last of the kids gone, I turned off the porch light and then went inside. I told myself that he was probably just some teenager that's being weird. A few hours later, maybe around 1 a.m., I woke up to a noise downstairs. At first, I thought it was my cat, but looking at the foot of my bed, Nala was sleeping on top of my mini fridge like she always does. I listened again, closer this time, hearing some kind of thuds, before a loud crashing sound, which seemed to come from downstairs. What's going on? I had a security system, so I got up to flick on the light and check it out, but the power seemed to be out. I then heard more crashing downstairs. I froze, realizing how bad of a situation this might be. I grabbed my phone and then I called 911. The dispatcher picked up almost immediately, and upon me telling her about my situation, she told me to lock my bedroom door and stay quiet, and that the officers were on their way. As I hid under the bed, the dispatcher told me to stay on the line. While I was on the phone, I heard it. Slow, heavy footsteps moving around downstairs, drawers opening, things clattering onto the floor, and faint grunts of effort as whoever it was looked through my house. Then, the footsteps started coming up the stairs. Every creak felt like it was right under my feet. I could hear the sound of the wood under the weight of someone who shouldn't have been here. I could hear doors opening, more sounds of ransacking, before systematically getting closer and closer. And then, the doorknob to my room jiggled, twice. A slow, testing twist, and then it stopped. Whoever it was didn't try to force it open, just walked away, and I heard them rummaging in the other rooms, the guest room, maybe the bathroom, and then silence. The cops arrived maybe 10 minutes later, but it felt like an hour. They searched the house, found the back door open, lock broken, no sign of anyone, and the place was ransacked. Mostly expensive small items missing, jewelry, some cash, my Switch, things that were easy to grab and go. I had a small camera on the porch, so the next morning I checked the footage. The power was cut, so I only have the footage from before that, but what it showed horrified me. The man in the white mask was there. After the last group of kids left, he didn't walk away like I thought. He stepped into my yard, just stood at the edge of my porch, staring at the door. He looked around my house and upon finding the power line to my home, cut it. That was around 11 p.m. The break-in was at nearly 2 hours after that, meaning that he had sat there for 2 hours in the cold October night, just waiting, plotting, preparing. The police found the guy about 2 weeks later, but unfortunately, they couldn't recover any of the things that he stole. Most likely sold them to make a quick buck. I still live in that house. I got new locks, more cameras, and a motion sensor light for the yard. I keep my valuables all in my room, and I lock my door before I go to sleep now. Because if I hadn't locked the door that night, who knows what could have happened.
This is something I experienced back in college, 2002. My roommate and I were driving home late from a Halloween party in the next town over. It was around midnight. We were on the back roads fighting the fog, and the whole drive we just sort of scanned the radio. We were wired on caffeine and sugar, trying not to fall asleep, so we started playing this dumb thing that we made up called the radio station game. One person would scroll through the FM stations, and whatever we landed on, the other had to make up a story about it. It started as a way to stay awake, but it got creepy, fast. Late-night radio is full of weird preachers, old country songs, and talk show hosts that sound like they're whispering straight into your brain. Anyway, we were scanning through, getting bursts of static and half songs when we land on something different. It's a voice, not singing, not music, just talking. It's kind of quiet and buried under some static. But my roommate leans in and says, "Hold on, go back." So I do. We turn it up a little, trying to make out what it's saying, and that's when we realize it's describing us. Two women, early 20s, driving east on Highway 14, red Honda Civic. They've just left a Halloween party. We both just sorta laughed, awkwardly, assuming it was a prank or some sort of weird coincidence. I mean, what are the chances? But then the voice keeps going, steady and calm. They don't believe what they're hearing. The air in the car suddenly feels freezing. My roommate turned the volume down halfway, but the voice just kept talking, the static pulsing between words. They think they can turn this off, that they can stop it. I remember my hand hovering over the knob. My roommate slammed it first, shutting the radio off entirely. We sat there in silence for a few seconds, both breathing way too hard. But then we started laughing, because what else do you do in that situation? I said something like, "Guess we found the world's creepiest DJ," trying to make it sound normal. But maybe 10, 15 seconds later, the radio turned on by itself. Same station, same static, but the voice was gone. Just white noise. I reached for the dial, and that's when it happened. A scream tore through the speakers. It wasn't a sound effect or feedback, this was a real scream. It started low, and then pitched up into something raw, like someone being hurt. And then it just stopped. Cut clean off, mid-breath. The stereo was off. No power, no lights on the console. But the sound was still ringing in the car and echoing off the glass. We pulled over on the shoulder, sat there for maybe a full minute, not saying a word. My roommate finally reached over and unplugged the stereo fuse from the dash. We drove the rest of the way in silence, the kind where you can actually hear your pulse. The next day we tried to find the same station, every frequency, every stretch of static. There was nothing. No trace of that voice. No broadcast in that range. Anyway, it's been over 20 years, and I've driven that same stretch of highway dozens of times. Never turned the radio on. Not when I'm alone.
It was Halloween night in Shibuya. If you've seen the news reports or been there in person, then you will know about the huge gatherings of people in fancy dress costumes. Maybe not this year, I guess. I want to tell you about the scariest thing that ever happened to me, back in 2017. I'm a female, and my friends and I decided that we would go to Shibuya in costume. We saw hundreds of others gathered around the famous crossing, all dressed up too. The October air was full of enthusiasm for the holiday. Shibuya was rammed. So many people were there. As we walked across the crossing, I smelled sweat, alcohol, and my feet were trampled on over and over. There was garbage everywhere. I was regretting coming at this point. The oncoming crowd pushed past me, and it separated me from my friends. I started searching for them as best I could, but when everyone's wearing masks and costumes, it's difficult. Everyone was drunk and just stumbling around, and I didn't stand a chance of finding them. I decided to find a less crowded area, and there I would text or call them. Before I knew it, I was down an empty back alley. Perfect, no one around. I took a deep breath and tried to calm down and compose myself. I was pretty annoyed at the situation. I could still hear the noise coming from the crossing area. A shabby man ambled towards me and sat down close by. Had he been there the whole time? I wondered. I couldn't figure out if he was in a costume or what he was supposed to be. He kind of looked like a shaman or something. He had long greasy hair and his face was gaunt. I looked closer and it honestly looked like he was wearing bits of costume he found on the street. Some parts were like a witch costume, bright polka dot tights and a witch's hat. Other parts looked like a clown's costume. Very weird. Nothing about this costume matched at all. "Give me some candy," he said as he stared at me. I ignored him and tried to walk past him. Then he did something unexpected. He shot up to his feet and grabbed hold of my arm. He blocked my path and said again, "Give me some candy." I couldn't move. I tried to wriggle free from his grasp. "Give me some candy." He slurred the words. He sounded in a daze. It was truly horrifying. I didn't know what else to do, so I just rooted through my bag, looking for something to give him. "Haven't you heard of trick or treat? You don't want a trick, do you?" he slurred. It was at this point I noticed when he pulled his hand out of the pocket of his hoodie. Something was in his hand. He had a knife. I didn't know if it was a toy knife or not, but I didn't want to find out. Sweat was running down my face. "Are you choosing trick?" He chuckled. He repeated it again and again. I was still blindly searching in my bag for some candy when I saw someone dressed as a police officer. I screamed for help at the officer. He looked my way and walked down the alley towards us. The weird guy who had hold of me just stared at the oncoming officer. "I'm saved," I thought, as he walked over. "What's the matter, miss?" he called as he approached. "Are you not giving this man his candy?" he said with a smile. He pulled his gun from his side holster and aimed it at my head. "Trick or treat," he grinned. I have never felt so helpless in my life, so betrayed, so alone. I felt as if it was the end for me. I didn't know what to do. There was no one around but everyone in earshot. They'd never hear me if I screamed, or they'd never even hear the sound of the gun. I was still absent-mindedly rooting through my bag when my finger touched on something which felt like a candy wrapper, just as the policeman approached me and put his hand on my wrist. I flung it out of my bag onto the floor They both let go of me and scrabbled around on the floor to reach the candy. I ran as fast as I could back to the crowd of people, and eventually I was reunited with my friends. I have no idea what happened that night, who those people were, if it was a prank or if it was a real thing. Either way, it was horrible. I really do hope it was a prank. I was invited to Halloween in Shibuya the next year, and of course, I politely declined. Just because there are many people around in the center of a city, it doesn't mean that it's safe. Please take care out there, guys.
This incident happened to me last year on Halloween. My younger brother and I were home alone since our parents had gone out to a Halloween party, and they had tasked us with handing out candy to the trick-or-treaters. This really bummed me and my brother out because we had made plans to go trick-or-treating with our friends too. A lot of people stopped by our house, and by 10 p.m., almost all the candy was gone, and my brother and I decided that we'd eat the rest. We were just sitting on the couch watching a scary movie and stuffing ourselves with candy when there was a knock at the door. So I stormed off the couch, wondering who the hell could be knocking at our door this late. I assumed it was just some late-night trick-or-treaters. Even if that was the case though, I had turned the porch light and Halloween decorations off, which should have been a dead giveaway that we were out of candy or that we weren't home, so I assumed that it was my parents. Being cautious though, I looked through the peephole and I saw a suspicious man standing on our front porch. He was wearing a black hoodie with a hood over his head, which made it difficult to see his face, and the only details of his face that I could spot was that he had a beard and dry, crusty lips. There was no way that this guy was a trick-or-treater because he wasn't even wearing a costume and he was far too old to be trick-or-treating. His hands were stuffed in the front pocket of his hoodie, and he also looked very thin. Every single red flag went off in my head about this guy. There was no way in hell that I was going to open the door. Still looking through the peephole, I watched as he knocked on the door again. He seemed desperate for us to open the door, and he was shaking a bit. But it wasn't cold outside, definitely not cold enough for someone to be trembling. He was giving me a bad vibe, and I just wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. "We're out of candy!" I shouted. I watched as a smile spread across his face. It wasn't a friendly smile. "Are you alone in there?" the man asked, almost in a mocking voice. His voice was raspy and dry, and my younger brother asked me if he should call the police, gripping his cell phone. The man let out a low grumble and said, "Sounds like you're not alone in there." I continued to watch him through the peephole, and his hands were still wedged tightly into his pocket and he was still shaking a bit. And I began to wonder if he was armed. I decided to take action and spoke to him in the most intimidating voice that I could. "Get the fuck away from my house or I will call the police." His smile faded and he bared his teeth. His teeth were piss yellow, and I concluded that he was probably some homeless crackhead. He had a look of fury plastered on his face. Fortunately, he left without trying to break in, probably because he knew that I wasn't fucking around with him. I didn't stop watching him through the peephole until I saw that he was completely off our property. My brother and I breathed a sigh of relief and decided not to call the police. We were a bit paranoid about this, but we just watched TV until our parents came home. We didn't really tell them about the man since he hadn't really tried to harm us. But now when I look back to this, I wish that we had called the police because maybe we would have been able to prevent the murder. You see, the next day, we found out that the elderly woman who lived a few houses down from us had been brutally murdered. Her neighbor had found her lying on her front porch, and she had been stabbed multiple times in the chest and neck, and my brother and I immediately knew who had done it. We told the police what we knew, but they couldn't do much from the information that we had given them since we hadn't seen many details of his face. They went on the hunt for the man, but they never caught him. I blame myself for that poor old lady's murder because I could have prevented it from happening just by calling the police. I think the most disturbing thing of all of this is the fact that he didn't take anything from the lady's house. Her house had been left untouched, but he could have gone in and taken what he wanted since her door was wide open. This meant that he just wanted to kill, and that was his only intention. He didn't want money or jewelry. He only had the urge to murder.
I'll tell you my scariest story. I've had creepy experiences, religious experiences, and supernatural experiences, which I will stand by as being something otherworldly. This Ouija one isn't necessarily one of them, but it's not bullshit, and I don't have a great explanation. Halloween 2 years ago, me and a buddy decided to do something fun. We got the car, and I told him I really wanted to try a Ouija board. We went to Walmart, a game shop, Target. No boards. Finally, we get to a bookstore and search the whole game aisle, which was very small. We asked if they had any in the back, and the guy said he'd check. He comes back with nothing but says, "Wait, I think I saw one here." We check the shelves again, just for the hell of it. And there one is. We definitely checked the whole aisle, but honestly, this kind of thing happens a lot. So probably nothing supernatural, just us not seeing it. We made jokes about how it appeared and we got the last one. We kept jokingly saying the night was meant for us. We took my car down to the woods. This place I know like the back of my hand. It was where I played as a kid and kind of my sanctuary. Me and my bros would jog or drink there sometimes. It was pitch black, so we didn't go all the way in and set up the board. We wanted to stay in the shadows, as a girl recently died on the tracks that ran through the woods when she was drunk and got caught under the train. My buddy Red received a call from a close friend of mine and his, as she had a fight with her boyfriend. Me and the other kid, Glenn, decided to get started. I was jokingly carving sigils and stuff into trees, and some other symbols I knew from an occult book I'd recently read, which, in hindsight, was probably stupid, but most were harmless sigils, just meant to open up the other side. I started using the board maybe 15 feet from Red, who was on his phone and hadn't moved. We asked some questions, and got mostly gibberish and the usual. Mostly, it barely moved. We kind of thought, damn, Ouija shit doesn't work. But Glenn was really into science, and was saying, it'll definitely work, but it's not spirits, it's just subconscious muscles. I was cool with that, just wanted to get something. After a couple of tries, we said, F it, let's go back to my place, or cruise around. But Red had just ended the call, and said he wanted one try at it, so I said we'd do it. At this point, it started getting weird. Red was pretty serious. If anything, the biggest joker there was me, and I can tell you that I wasn't pranking anyone that night. He walked over to the board, and we noticed the little triangle was gone. We had had it seconds before, and looked around the busted picnic table we had used, and it was nowhere. A minute or two of searching led us to finding it, 15 feet away, where Red was sitting. He hadn't touched it at all that night, and he was the only one over there. Since we arrived, it had been me and Glenn on the table, and Red 15 feet away. Till Red walked to the table, no one was over there, leading us to think, how could it get all the way over there when it was here seconds before? I kind of shrugged it off, and maybe thought one of the guys had somehow snuck it over. But that's pretty unrealistic, unless they threw it when my back was turned, and neither of them seemed like they would. This really had no effect on us, and after a minute, we continued. Me and Red did the board. We asked about the mutual friend's relationship, something like, will they stay broken up? And got the letters H-E-L with our eyes closed. Glenn would tell us when it had stopped, as well as the letter he saw. He also later assured us neither of the two of us had our eyes opened. We went for another letter. At this point, I thought, and later Red tells me he thought I was doing the same thing, that he was purposely controlling it to spell hell yes, as in they definitely would break up as a joke. We got to the last one, and it really wasn't on a letter. It was kinda on cue, so we decided it was just another jumbled up word. Well, then we both realized it was also half on P, so we all kinda got it at the same time. Help. We all totally freaked out. Like that feeling something is wrong and total dread. We grabbed all our stuff. Sometime in the night, I believe at this time, I grabbed a key from the table, thinking it was one of the guys. I don't believe it was there when we arrived, but I can't be totally sure about this either. I pushed it all in my pocket and ran. The rest of the night went fine and we were all kinds of spooked. I told them maybe it was the girl that was hit by the train. As it happened, maybe a couple 100 yards from us very recently, and she was doing the same shit we were doing that night. About a week later, I wore the same flannel again. In the top pocket was the key. Realizing it wasn't one of the guys, I posted it on our group chat with the picture. Whose key? Everyone said it wasn't theirs. I was sitting next to Red later and double-checked it wasn't his. He was kind of spooked by the Ouija board, and I kept saying it was the ghost key, just to mess with him. I said I was going to leave it in his class to haunt the teacher. It was kind of a joke, as the teacher was kinda a weird dude, but also cause I didn't need the key. Might as well toss it. Red watched me toss the key into the trash. This was the teacher's last class of the day, and there was one more class till school was out. We went to the final class, and then when the bell rang, I left to the top floor, which held only the choir room. I was going to chill with Red till he was done there, so I could get a ride home. The teacher was a super religious Polish dude. When I walked in, we hung out and the teacher was tossing something up and down. I asked him what it was. He showed me a key. I made a joke to Red that it was the ghost key, but he actually looked at it and commented that it was the same size and color with a similar backing. We had the photo in the group chat, and he later pulled it up. The grooves matched perfectly, and the scuffs too. At this point, the Polish teacher asked what was happening, and Red told him. He was super pissy because it was a Catholic school, and hearing us with a Ouija board was basically like telling him that we loved Satan. I asked where he got it, because I thought Red gave it to him. He was dead serious, not joking anymore. It appeared to me. We kept asking what he meant, and he just kept saying, it appeared to me. That freaked us out, and I told Red to come clean, assuming he asked the teacher to open the room to grab the key. Something I don't see him doing, but it was the only logical explanation. Red was more freaked out than me. The teacher lost his shit on us and wouldn't give it back to me. I wanted to dump it in holy water or something. Later that day, he went to his church and had the key blessed, burned, then buried. I got yelled at by 2 teachers, and Red no longer wanted to mess with Ouija boards or talk about anything like that. I put away the Ouija board and used it once since, but nothing ever happened again. On graduation day, I talked to him about it, and he alluded that something more happened. I asked what happened with the key, and he said something like, "Well, I took it in and the priest tried to burn it, blessed it, and rid it of evil, but..." And then, when I asked what the but was, he wouldn't tell me. Maybe he just slipped up. Maybe something happened. Red never admitted it, even though I don't know how he would, and Glenn was told about it after the key was burned. I don't know what happened, and won't claim it was definitely paranormal, but there is definitely no explanation I can come up with.
Ever since I first saw this house, I knew I wanted to own it and live there someday. It was my dream home, overlooking one of the local rivers, and would have had an incredible view. I was on a river tour on a historic boat, listening while the tour guide talked about the interesting places in the local area that were worth seeing, especially along the shoreline. There were historical houses from when the area was first settled, some of the old military buildings, and other things I wasn't really interested in. I sat up the top, taking in the afternoon sun and away from other people, spending more time focused on the scenery, and I was only half listening. I saw it among several trees, peeking out, and my eye was instantly drawn to it. I remembered seeing a picture of it when I was a child, and even back then, I wanted to go to the house and own it someday. It was a 2-story house with white faded paint and a large balcony that overlooked the river. It had broken windows and clearly had seen better days, with vandals going in to damage the property, at least from what I could see from the outside. The tour guide said it had been owned by a wealthy landowner who died through mysterious circumstances, and ruin followed the family, even when they tried to escape. He also added that the local legend said it was haunted, and anyone who tried to purchase the home ended up losing everything. That the house had ended up claiming multiple people's lives. It all sounded interesting, and other people asked if there were ghost tours available. He said no, for the safety of the guests, and then the topic moved on to another feature. The rest of the tour was relatively boring. When the tour ended, I went back home. I, however, never forgot about the house and decided I need to learn more about it. I started researching the house and found some YouTube videos about it, even older posts on dead forums that discussed all the different theories. I tried to find it on Google Maps. I had to change the year in order to find it, going all the way back to 2008, when the house was in reasonable condition, and it was still visible from the road. It looked to be abandoned here too. In 2012, it looked like there had been renovations that had been started, but for whatever reason, they were never completed. The bricks and other materials left there were later stolen. I worked out the address, and I won't share here for, well, your safety. I don't want you or anyone else to get hurt. I searched for it again online, and found sites talking about the rumored history. Apparently murders and other perverse crimes happened here. However, there were no police reports or any newspaper articles about it. All gossip. I didn't think it was fair for such a beautiful home to fall into ruin. I contacted the council to see who owned the property and if they were willing to have me buy it. I discovered the owner lived overseas and had never even visited the property. She inherited it from a wealthy relative and was waiting for the local area to become more marketable in order to get the best price. However, dealing with the many issues the house brought was annoying at best. The end result was I received a decent price to take it, I was given a week to make a decision, and given permission to visit the property. The driveway was non-existent, and the closer I got to the house, the fantasy of fixing it up was fading fast, with the estimate cost of it all. When the real estate agent opened the garage door, we found copper thieves had stolen the wiring out of the walls, and any leftover furniture had been trashed. Graffiti coated the walls, and the estate agent told me that the bones of the house were still solid. As I walked through, I realized the cost was adding up, far more than what I could afford, but I still wanted to go through the house. Questionable rooms with a bathroom. Inside the shower, it was filled with a variety of dead animals, some fresh and other skeletons. The tiling scraped from their claws as they tried to escape. I don't know how they ended up in there. The pair of us coughed, and the agent forgot himself, hilariously, even slipped into a rough accent and caught himself on. The kitchen, you could tell it was beautiful when it was new, had all the cupboards ripped out, and vines had grown up through the drainage pipes. I climbed the beautiful staircase. The wooden beams hadn't been polished for so long, yet it retained its splendor. I nearly forgot everything else when I went up. All the other rooms were filled with broken bed frames, the vanities and chest of drawers open with nothing inside them. As I walked on the creaky floor, I wondered whether I would be able to handle all of this. All the doors had been left open, except for one. At the end of the hallway was a closed door, and I had a weird feeling when I got closer to it. It was sharply cold, and I asked the agent if he knew what the room was. He told me it was probably a bedroom. He was pale and couldn't stand still. Clearly didn't want to be there anymore. I opened the door, and to my surprise this room was different. It was a child's bedroom, clean. The wallpaper wasn't damaged by graffiti or the elements. The bedding looked fresh, covered in teddy bears and other stuffed animals, while porcelain dolls rested on the shelves. There was no dust anywhere, and the carpet was clean. By the large bay window was a rocking chair, with a pillow on it, looking out at the river while another boat was floating by. I asked if someone had been living here, or if there was a squatter. Without it, why was this room so intact? There was also the terrifying thought of, why would a squatter have a kid's room prepared? The agent and I kept looking around the room for any clues. He stood near dolls and looked at them. I think he was frightened, and I opened up the bedside table drawer. There was a book closed with a lock, a gold chain with a locket, and a small bouquet of dried flowers. I picked up the diary. I remembered having one just like it when I was young, and I managed to get into the lock. I remember having one just like it when I was young, and I was able to break the lock. Maybe this was owned by the last resident. I saw a shadow coming in from the doorway, and thought the real estate agent was getting ready to leave. I called out, "Just a minute." I flicked through the pages, and the handwriting was beautiful, cursive, and as I kept going, the handwriting was becoming more erratic and aggressive the more I turned. "I hate them" was repeated all over the pages. It didn't change until I reached the final one. In jagged, black lettering it said, "Kill." The room felt cold, and I asked the agent if he opened a window, and if he felt the cold too. No reply. I turned around and noticed he was gone. I didn't want to be left alone here. I kept the open book in my hand, and walked out back through the back door. I had a feeling I wasn't alone, but no one was there. I called out the estate agent's name and received no response. I looked out the window and saw both of our cars still there, so I knew he hadn't left. I went down the creaking stairs and saw water puddles on the floor that had come from the outside. Maybe another animal had gotten in? The trail suddenly ended with no reason, and I stood close by. I remembered the stories, especially how the house attracted death. I saw the agent walk through the scrub in the direction of the river. He didn't look back when I called out to him, and nor did he pause. He kept walking down until he reached the water's edge. I expected him to stop, but instead he walked straight into the water. Nothing slowed him down. I saw bubbles where his head would have been under the water, and finally, they stopped. He gave no sign he was going to do this, no warning, nor any sign he was having trouble in life. I took out my phone and called the emergency hotline. It connected then dropped, so I tried it again, and the same thing happened. I walked back to the house and called. This time it wouldn't connect at all. I heard faint laughter coming from the dark hallways, and it felt like whoever this was coming closer. I didn't want to be pestered by a squatter or a homeless person, but I have to admit, it didn't feel like any of those. I left and went to sit in my car, feeling slightly safer in there. I tried calling again, and debated just leaving the scene altogether, when I saw shadow figures walking past the windows. What frightened me was when one turned to look directly at me, and instantly I felt sick. I drove down the street and finally felt like I could breathe. The call finally connected. I waited while the police arrived on the scene, along with an ambulance, although it was too late for him. He was already dead. Since it was fresh, they were able to retrieve his body, and when they checked his messages, nothing gave any warning about what he intended on doing. I told them what happened, and soon my story only added to the local legends about the place. Forums had photos taken by urban explorers that showed the infamous child's bedroom, and I was able to watch it degrade until someone came in and vandalized it. The graffiti covered the walls, and someone set it on fire, leaving black ash all over the room. As you can guess, I never bought the house, and when I called the owner to apologize and tell her what happened, she didn't sound surprised, shocked, or angry. She simply said, "I knew you weren't going to buy it," and hung up. I haven't been able to stop thinking about the house and what could have been. As far as I knew, what happened to the real estate agent was the only death ever reported there. I haven't wanted to go back, but the curiosity has always remained. I've been scared to share my story because it might encourage some people to go there. I don't know if the shadow figures were bad entities trying to cause problems, or the ghosts of people who had died there. I still don't know what the laughter was, and I never want to hear it again. Sometimes late at night, I can hear that creepy laughter and feel like I'm being watched. And I wonder about whatever it was in that house, because I think it followed me home.
And here's the riddle for this video. Hey everyone, this is your creepy sister. Thank you so much for watching the video. I do hope you enjoyed it. Also, don't forget to leave a like and a comment. It really helps the channel out. A big shout out to both my channel members and Patreon members. Thank you so much for taking your support to the next level. You guys are great. And again, to everyone, stay scared, because your fear feeds me.